Welcome everybody to the Return to Play webinar for youth sports. My name is Zach Bayruti. I am allegedly the voice of the Reno Aces, although I haven't called an Aces game as such yet, but soon enough it'll happen. But on behalf of the Aces, we'd like to welcome everyone to the Return to Play webinar for youth sports. And I think I speak for everyone in the organization when I say that in uncertain times, I think the best way for us to navigate and to make it through is together. And I think when we can draw on practical experiences, learn from successes, I think we're all better off for it. And obviously there are a few experts out there when it comes to handling sports and gatherings in the midst of a pandemic. There are more now than there were months ago. But, you know, there's so many variables, and especially on the youth side. And I think all of us with the Aces and formerly 1868 FC have really had to immerse ourselves in some of the practical elements of this. And we absolutely feel like we can be a good resource for people and for groups as we move forward and as things start to open up. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce the panel here. Eric Edelstein, the president of the Aces. Doug Raftery, the Aces COO and formerly the GM of 1868 FC. And Doug was one of the guys helping to lead the charge to get fans to Greater Nevada Field when 1868 FC was playing toward the tail end of the season back in the, I guess it was early fall. Michael Thomas, the VP of Marketing at Greater Nevada Credit Union, and Lance Ferrato, the Business Relations Program Manager for the City of Reno. Welcome to all of you. And we're going to go ahead and Max, if you want to queue up the slides, we can kind of get going here with our Return to Play webinar.
Great. And Zach, I'll kick it off if you don't mind. I'll go, but I just
oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I forgot you were going to go, Michael.
No, it's all good. I'm gonna be very brief. I just wanted to say, Zach, we can't wait to hear you start announcing the Aces game again. But I just wanted to explain from the Greater Nevada perspective, and all of our family of companies that represent why we're here today and why this is important. And it's really simple. You said it. We're here and doing this because we know sports are so important to all of you that are tuning into this, and also critically important to our kids and the youth. And that's really what we wanted to do, was take advantage of the unique perspective, like you said, that Reno FC and the Aces were able to bring, in learning so much information about how to bring sports back safely. And nowhere, including the place that bears our name, is it more apparent at sporting venues the impact that COVID's happened. It's been quiet, and when it's been quiet, there hasn't been any participation in the stands. And we are so excited to see life returning back to sports fields all throughout Nevada. I mean, whether it's a baseball diamond, whether it's a soccer field, or whether it's a gymnasium, we're starting to see those signs of life return. And if we all do our part, and it can be so small, the part that we play, we can really bring back sports safely. And that's what we're here to do tonight. I do want to remind it, and so important, what I think all of us have learned through COVID, the rainbow, so to speak, among the rain clouds, is that sports is not just about what happens on the field. It's really the lessons that we're teaching our kids on how to win and lose with grace, how to be leaders on and off the field, and what teamwork really means. And that is really where I end it with tonight, is the knowledge that's been acquired by this panel that's about to speak to you, and the information that can be accessible well after the fact can be put to use. But it's so much like we hear about vaccines right now. Vaccines are only effective when they're in someone's arm, and knowledge is only effective when you share it. So without further ado, I want to turn over to this great panel, but thanks for the partnership that we've had with the Reno Aces to bring this program to life. And we hope that it leads to a lot of happy faces back on the field, and also happy faces in the stands as we watch our kids get back to playing sports.
Thanks, Michael. It's well said. We appreciate that. And yeah, speaking of teamwork, as a team, I think we're gonna help and do our best to help guide folks through how to reopen here with youth sports. And Max, without further ado, now I think we could start the slideshow, and we're good to do so. And there we are. We are returning to play, God willing, soon. And with that, I believe we're going to turn it over to Eric now, and Eric will get us started here and kind of delve into this this webinar and this presentation.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think the most important thing, throughout all this is that this information is going to live, and we want to be interactive with you. So as you're out there, and whether you're a coach, an administrator, whether you're an athlete yourself, if you have questions along the way, we want you to continue to reach out to us, and we're going to help answer those questions. If that means coming out, surveying your playing fields, helping with anything we can do, we're going to be available for you. The most important thing through this process that I think we've all learned is that, safety at the field starts with safety off the field, and making sure that, you're living safe and you're doing the right things off the field. And that's the first step that's going to keep everybody safe when you get to the field. So making sure that, your family's following the rules, that you're following the rules, that you're maintaining your distance, you're wearing masks. If you're not feeling well, you're staying to yourself. And, the best way that we can exist in this environment is to recognize our own behaviors and do our best for ourselves. And by there, we can do our best for everybody else. I think as we continue, through this, I think you want to be able to look at your teams and have really good sense, especially for coaches and administrators. You want to understand a little bit more about the athletes and the parents and grandparents and the people who are surrounding your athletes. It's really important to know that not only the risk factors of your athletes themselves, but also of the people that surround them on a regular basis. And the more that you understand about that, the more helpful you can be and the better decisions you can make when it comes to if someone isn't feeling well, whether there are positive tests, and we'll get to that later. Making sure taking temperature regularly, arriving to team events. Doug can talk about it, but we had some players that were isolated last year with the soccer club, literally because they didn't roll the windows down in the carpool to practice. And that was the difference between those players being cleared to play after a positive test and not being cleared to play. So being really cognizant of how you're coming and going from your practices and games, hyper important.
And Eric, on that, I think that, that last point on arrival to team events can be so important. Everyone thinks, I think, about the play on the field, whereas a lot of the pressure points are actually elsewhere, and the vehicle being one of those. So, with 1868, yes, traveling to Golden Eagle out in Sparks and a good 20-minute drive, let alone windows up, but you're in 15 plus minute territory there, and masks or no masks, 4 people in the same car. Whether you're in separate living areas or not, one of those players ended up having COVID-19. And when you're leading up to a season, as we were, it took 4 guys off of our list of our roster for the first game of the season, to say the least. Our head coach wasn't too pleased at the time. So I think it's important, though, that just that point, you have to know where the risks exist. And it's not just in one location. One small little hiccup can take you down. So being vigilant in that respect. And that goes to training. Obviously, within the training environment, we didn't, as 1868 at the time, have really indoor environments from a training perspective, but wearing masks within a training environment indoors. But I think it's all the other things as well. I mean, think about propping open the gates. We would have our players enter in our security corridor down the side of the stadium. We would prop open the gate for a chunk of time and have a security team member be aware of what was going on, what time they were arriving, what time would they be leaving. Food and drink is extremely important. When you get to that, we worked with Roundabout Catering locally on individual packaged meals. We would have a designated staff member who would heat up the meals in a microwave instead of all the players gathering in the locker room, all of them touching a microwave. Things to think about, when you are having food or things like that in an event for players. Medical treatment. This is now, and this was when soccer was active. It was one-on-one, and there would be extreme sanitation, glove training, changing from our trainer. We had to do early treatment. We had to do late treatment. We changed treatment schedules overall. And it's all part of just the players learning the new way. And then equipment was probably one of the biggest things that the United Soccer League touched on at the forefront, was the sanitation of those pieces, including the balls, the cones, the pennies. What we did, and I thought worked very well, and I would recommend for youth sports as well, was that coaches and players were actually instructed to not touch the cones. We would have a staff member, our equipment manager, set everything up. And then we would actually have a staff member, usually the equipment manager, break everything down. Typically, you're changing cones, you're changing drills. We would have one person focused on that, so that everyone's hands weren't touching all different things. Usually when you wrap up training, you say, all right, wherever you are, pick up the cones. That wasn't a thing. We would go back to the locker room. The equipment manager or that staff member would then sanitize all of the cones, all of the balls, and wash all of the pennies daily. And that kept us, I think, extremely safe from an equipment standpoint.
Doug, you want to take game day or you want me to take game day?
You can take it.
All right. So I think Doug and I both got very familiar. And look, this is the, this is when you're going to have family come around. There's going to be more people who want to watch. These game day protocols are really, really important. Maybe call on Lance. I know one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten from the city is that the parking lots are actually a significant issue. Lance, if you want to maybe touch on that for game day.
Yeah, absolutely. Parking lots are huge. Any place that anybody's that people are gonna congregate, and that tends to be the area most common with sports and leagues coming together. People either want to talk on the way in or talk on the way out. You've got similar arrival times if their schedule is going. So most of the kids are told to be there at a certain time. So you're going to get everybody pulling into a parking lot, and then you get chit chat between parents. You get it between the kids, and that's just that's a really volatile place, and it's something to keep in mind. And staff's got to keep an eye on that, and the coaches have got to be really aware, and they have to be able to spread that information to everybody, and so everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. Just in general, there. I mean, I think the staggering of arrival times. I know that was a big thing with soccer. Was the team would arrive in groups. We expect the Aces to be similar this year. Guys are going to be assigned times that they arrive. They're going to get certain work and certain treatment done. They're going to leave at different times. Obviously, with youth sports, more challenges at play in that specific scheduling. But having a coach or administrator, first in, last out to ensure that congregating doesn't happen. That congregating in the between arriving again is one of your highest risk factors when gathering for sports.
Before Doug takes the next slide, I'm just going to jump in real quick. If anybody has any questions, you can use the Q&A down at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you can ask anything via the Q&A, and at the end of the presentation, we'll get to that. But I just wanted to throw that in there before we went to Doug.
So I think within positive tests or suspected positive results that could come from a suspected case, I think I just really want to quickly explain what we did. And I think the most important thing that anyone can probably take out of it is that you need to have a process. And I'm hopeful that our process can just help in building out yours. So I'm going to use just confirmed positives for this example. When you have we had a company called Let's Get Checked. If we had someone showing symptoms, we did test weekly, sometimes a couple of times a week during 1868. If we did have a confirmed positive, we would name the positive cases. That was just released to a couple of individuals, myself, our president, and our human resources. Understanding that within a professional world, some key staff, obviously the head coach or the assistant coach, trainer, et cetera, may need to be involved in those conversations so that we can notify the correct authorities. That would be the next thing. Our team doctor would be looped in, who would notify the local health department in a manner that was consistent at the time with the health authority guidance. And then from there, our trainer immediately reviewed. We had daily questionnaires of people who, all the players had the lists, who their roommates were, who they had close contact with, prolonged close contact at the time, and we would review the logs for 7 to 14 days. And we would have to immediately cease any further interaction between any players who had close contact with that confirmed positive case. We did coordinate with HR on notifying all of our staff, which is extremely important, so that our staff who was in our building knew that something was going on with the team, but that is just a player, or it was a covered person. That's what we considered a player, a staff member, et cetera, who was part of our bubble, if you will. A covered person tested positive. You don't name the name for legality standpoint. And we had to deal with some PR side of things of what that meant on social media or media requests coming in. But I think more importantly than any of that, it's what comes next of closing team controlled areas, having that person obviously isolate and anyone who is in close contact, team controlled areas being sanitized, deep cleaning those. We would close for at least 24 hours, all of those areas. We would then connect with the team. We all distance outside within the stadium and did another enhanced hygiene conversation of the things that they should be looking out for, and providing additional PPE, masks, disposable gloves, just health guidance to the rest of the team that wasn't in close contact at the time with that confirmed positive case. So again, it's just, I think, the process, and that's what's most important to put into play. And certainly we can help with that if a process needs to be built out for a team or a league, something that we've been through.
Lance, you want to take the lead on the distancing and sanitizing at the venue?
Sure. So as far as stadium operations go, it's along the lines, same lines as I was speaking to about parking. Not so much, in touch with the players and the equipment, but the stadium in general. So by now everyone knows about social distancing and sanitization, but for the most part, people get excited when they go out. They kind of forget the rules and they can at times. So keeping the distance between groups is going to help everybody continue to participate in the playing and the spectating. So it's really important to keep the distance. If reports come out of mass congregations and there's no enforcement of the distancing, then that's when these kind of events can get shut down, and that's the last thing we want. So in regard to social distancing, make sure that you have signage throughout the venue. As restrictions start to loosen, weather gets nicer, people are getting excited, they're going to forget or just tend to not worry as much. And that's a natural thing, but it's still one of the biggest pieces of the mitigation of all this. So signage is going to help just to keep a constant reminder. While that helps, staff's got to be on top of things too. There's a need for a set of eyes on everybody. Remembering that there must be designated staff to monitor social distancing. The governor's directives have been clear about this kind of thing. If staff's allowing groups to get together, others are going to notice, and maybe even subconsciously, the distancing standards will collapse. So it's something to be really cognizant of. As far as sanitation, every business in the city is required to provide sanitizer to patrons and in this case, it's no different. It's not so much a business, but it's a place where everybody's coming in from different angles and we need to keep it clean. Creating designated areas throughout the venues in order to allow easy access for everyone is key. Setting them up near entrances is a good idea, but also be cognizant of congested areas and try to scatter stations around the stadium as possible, or the venue, whatever you're working with. And then also make sure that the restrooms are monitored and kept as clean as possible. I know that consideration of assigning staff to monitor the number of people that go into a restroom at a given time is a recommendation, but obviously it's not always feasible, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Along the lines of social distancing and stadium seating in general, it gets tricky, and this is where staff comes in. In the large venues, it's hard to keep tabs on everybody, and in the smaller venues, it's hard to keep everybody spaced out. So it's not an easy game to play. In any case, groups of no more than 6 are allowed. People are going to try and convince you or the monitor that they know each other and everything's fine, but this is strict recommendations and guidelines sent down by the governor's directives. So there's something that we need to adhere to. Also make sure that independent groups are spread out apart adequately. And if you need be, rope off certain parts in the larger venues. If you don't want people congregating in certain areas, or you're just adhering to capacity standards, then make sure to rope those areas off. Obviously, these numbers are going to be, these guidelines are going to be a moving target over the next few months. So it's important to stay up on what's current and what directives are currently in place. So as far as parking goes, we talked about that. Just to touch on it again, it's one of the biggest areas, and as Eric said, this is where we can avoid that. You can really avoid too much contact, which is it's a great idea just to spread things out as much as you can. Obviously, with youth sports, it's not as easy to stagger things, but we can recommend people stay in their cars until it's time to practice or time to play the game, so that everybody's not going out there, all at once and just hanging out and waiting for coach to get there or things like that. Entering the stadium, if possible, designate specific entrances for participants, staff, and fans. When possible, use as many as you can. You just want to avoid bottlenecks and people congregating too long, whether getting either, depending on the size of the venue, if you're checking tickets or things like that, you're just having mass lines standing around. Want to avoid that. If it's reasonable, use signage and stickers on the ground, direct the flow of everybody. Some other ideas for signage to be posted at the entrance would be capacity limits, which is 35% as of right now, 50% on March 15th, assuming nothing changes. But again, those numbers could go up, could go down, just depending on how things go. Also, as it's been spoken on a little bit before, prohibiting or noticing to patrons that entering the gathering, if they're experiencing symptoms, is a really bad idea. Obviously, you want to avoid these kind of situations. And then obviously the blatant obvious one, face coverings are required for spectators and anybody not participating in the event, and only under certain circumstances can they take their masks off. So those are all good things to post and keep the public. Not that they don't already know these things, because they've been pretty prevalent over the last year, but they're good reminders, especially as the restrictions loosen. So lastly, on event preparations, as I touched on a little bit before, schedules. Trying to put a schedule together. Keep in mind that per current guidance by the Nevada Health Response, that games and practices must be timed to allow at least 30-minute breaks between the finish and start of subsequent sessions. So if you've got practices coming in and second games and third games, make sure that those are adequately spaced out to allow, just so there's no congestion. There's not a bunch of in and out. And again, the parking lot, same kind of idea there. In terms of players and coaches, some ideas are would be to encourage people to wait in their cars, as I said. You can also stagger arrival times if possible. I know it's a little more difficult with youth sports, but maps, putting together maps of the venue, especially with a larger venue, posting maps can be helpful in directing the crowds on where to go. Marking bathrooms, sanitizing stations, it creates less congregation in specific areas. And if visitors can see that there are multiple points on the map, they're more apt to spread out. These maps are also used for a lot of other things like safety issues, exits, and then even future knowledge of the venue. So if when they come back next time, they know exactly where they can go and find what they need. So
that'd be a chance. I'm going to plug youth sports at renoaces.com. That's a catch-all email address that if you have any questions, if you'd like any assistance, send us photos of your venue, and we can have somebody mock up markings, entrances, exits, show us, take a Google Map screenshot of the venue. We'd be happy to lend our creative services to helping venues, parks, fields, be able to create those maps so that you can pass them along. Registration protocols. I think we've talked on this, quite a bit, but I think it is important that if there are any, if you have any positive tests, understanding that there is a legal requirement to notify the health district. Oftentimes the testing provider will be doing that along with that positive test, but that is an obligation. if that person is, part of a group that you're watching, that you're reporting that. We've talked about, stopping action for 24 hours, doing cleaning. And then, for that positive case, again, having that plan, that, positive case can return 10 days after initial symptoms present, and 72 hours without symptoms is general the safe guidelines for those players to return.
Yeah, Lance, appreciate you touching on a lot of the venue signage. Not a ton to add here. Certainly within the facility, we have big video board and LED boards to be able to get out additional messaging. But I think it's important even for think volunteers, staff that you have within the youth sports landscape. We had our ushers go up and down aisles to ask people, if they weren't actively eating or drinking, to pull their masks back up and make sure we were vigilant in that respect. And then what you mentioned, Lance, very, very important for entrance and exit points, let alone at gates, but really those potential higher traffic locations of concessions, restrooms, let alone the sanitation of those areas, but just the setup of those as well. You want an in, you want an out. You don't want the people crossing of the in and the outs. We have no entry without mask signs, without, throughout the stadium, all over. So again, signage is a big thing. If you're looking for the type of signage that would work for your venue, something we certainly can help with.
Yeah, like Doug said, we're happy to share any graphics, images, anything that we've got that can help. If you do have a concession stand, we know there are probably volunteers that are working those. We definitely recommend that that you go cashless if that's at all feasible. Greater Nevada Field will be cashless going forward, and that's just something to, again, avoid the touching and exchanging of money that isn't 100% necessary. Provide stanchions. Again, signage is just so key. Just continue to put signs up, put 6-foot markers. Have been advised, it's a little goofy, but get some pool noodles. They're really cheap. You hold a pool noodle out, and that's about 6 feet. And as you're setting up lines, people lining up, in different places, gives you an idea of what that distancing needs to look like. And then really just want to keep everything covered. Make sure your food and beverage items are either prepackaged or, served in a completely wrapped environment, so that, nobody is actually touching your food other than you. These added resources here, really important. They're going to continue to be updated, as Lance said. State of Nevada guidance is going to continue to change. The CDC guidance is going to continue to change. And all of these resources and more are available at renoaces.com. You can find this information. We're going to continue to update it real time as we go. And again, that youthsports@renoaces.com as a catch-all email address. Anything that we haven't addressed at all, please send it to us. Ask us for help, and we want to help get youth sports back to playing and being safe.
Fantastic job. And I think that was all very, very useful and practical information. I do want to get a couple of questions in here at the end. And I want to start with Lance. What's been the biggest trouble spot as far as people following the COVID protocols, and where can people really kind of focus their energy on getting better?
Yeah, I think a couple people touched on it, and it's the parking lots for one. It's the entrances and exits. It's anywhere that more people congregate than not. Obviously, once everybody's in their seat and they're kind of settled, it's not such a worry. But getting in and out and stopping and chit-chatting and catching up with people in the parking lot or like just in lines, you'd be amazed to see how people feed off of each other. They see people do that, and then they do it, and then it just expands, and it's like wildfire. If everyone tries their best to remember to avoid those kind of situations and go straight to the car, or try to make it through the entrance exit, as quickly as possible, then those things can be mitigated. And it's just, as Michael said when he started off, it's everybody doing their part, and it's a little thing that we can work on.
Of course. I'm going to go to Eric next, and Doug, if you want to jump in and piggyback on this as well, you can. But can you kind of tell us what it's going to look like when Greater Nevada Field opens for the Aces, as best you know right now? Like, when do people have to wear masks the entire time? Obviously there'll be distance, but do they have to wear masks the entire time? And is there anything different you're going to be doing for people who are vaccinated, or is it just going to be kind of a blanket? The restrictions are just blanket restrictions.
I think there's a lot of moving targets there, and we've gotten a lot of questions about, hey, if a group of doctors want to come and they're all vaccinated, can they sit together without distancing? I mean, at the moment, the answer is pretty clearly no. And so we're working right now on the governor's directive, which is a 20% capacity. We are, about 9 weeks away from opening. Actually, might be 9 weeks from today that we actually open. So a lot can change by then. But I would expect distancing and masking to be a thing throughout the whole season, and something that I think will probably permeate our society in greater regularity than we even realize, as we go forward. But it'll definitely be required here. Unless you're actively eating or drinking is going to be the typical loosening point. But if you're just sitting in your seats, watching, we're going to have people masked. We're planning on seating in pods of no more than 6. We're going to be following the governor's directive, and then we're going to be working with, assuming May 1, the county does, take over, we're starting that process to get to know what they're thinking. And again, RenoAces.com and our social channels is going to be the continued place to find the latest.
Doug, anything to add to that?
I think Eric's got it pretty good. Nothing to add there. I mean, truly, right, it does change by the day, which I think is exciting, right? And hopefully it's for the good, but understanding that, we are balancing, and the goal is to do it as safe as possible in the end. So however we can get that done come May 13th for our home opener for the Aces is what we're going to do. It's as simple as that. So we will follow the guidance, and there's a lot of authorities who are much, much better than us, who are requesting that we do things a certain way. And we're happy to do that.
Cool. Lastly, this is the last one, and I'll direct it at Eric and Doug. You can jump in if you've heard anything as well. But what's Major League Baseball said about protocols as far as testing for players? I think it's relevant here because we're talking about youth sports. What are they doing at the Major League level, which now obviously trickles down into AAA West, if you will? What are they doing as far as protocols for the players to keep the players safe, and what guidelines they have to follow?
Sure. So, they're following extremely strict guidelines at the major leagues. We're still waiting at spring training right now. We're still waiting on what those guidelines are going to look like for the AAA season. There is a heightened level of awareness of AAA because of that. They're going to need to get players up from AAA into the big leagues, and they're going to want those players to come into that environment knowing that they've been living and doing the right things in AAA. I know they're testing twice a week in spring training right now, until there is full vaccination, and maybe even after there's vaccination. I would expect that at least once a week, the players are going to continue to get tested. I know that there's been discussions of red zones and tier 1 people and places that tier 2 can't go when the red zone is active, and there's going to be a lot of rules that we're going to have to follow. Players probably aren't going to sign autographs this year, which I hate. But those clear separations are going to be there throughout. And we're going to work hard to try to find other ways for our players to interact. But it's going to be pretty locked down. It's maybe not quite as loose and free as we're used to, but it'll all be in the spirit of getting games played.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, obviously, and we're excited to have the games again, God willing, starting the first week of May. I want to just give one more plug to it was at youthsports at RenoAces.com, Eric. That's the catch-all email. And if anybody has any questions or needs anything in terms of resources, youthsports at RenoAces.com is the place to email. Great job, everyone. And again, we're here for everyone in the community. If you have any questions, need anything answered, need any guidance, please reach out. That's what this is all about. So until next time, thank you, and go Aces.